In the ruins near Baghdad, archaeologists found something that shouldn't exist: small ceramic jars. Inside, copper cylinders and iron rods. When filled with vinegar or wine, they generate electrical current. Modern voltage, 0.5 to 1 volt per jar. Chain them together, potentially higher voltage. The question: did ancient Persians discover electricity 2,000 years before Volta and Galvani? Or are we seeing what we want to see in random ancient objects? The Baghdad batteries were found in the early 1900s, though documentation is fragmentary. They're typically dated to the Parthian period or early Sasanian period, roughly 2,100–1,700 years old. The vessels are 13 to 15 cm tall, made of clay, containing rolled copper cylinders with iron rods inserted in the center, sealed with bitumen. At first, archaeologists had no idea what they were. Storage jars, ritual vessels, decorative objects. Then someone filled one with vinegar and touched the terminals. It shocked them. Replicas of the Baghdad batteries demonstrate they generate approximately 0.5 to 1.0 volt of direct current, produce measurable electric current, function as a simple galvanic cell, and work with various acidic liquids. A single battery is weak, but multiple batteries connected in series could increase voltage, enough electricity for various applications. Low voltage electricity could be used for electroplating, medical treatment, religious or ceremonial effects. But here's the problem: we have no evidence any of these were actually done. If Baghdad batteries were used for electroplating, we'd expect to find artifacts showing electroplating. We don't. If used for medical purposes, ancient medical texts would mention electrical treatment. They don't. The Baghdad batteries were found without proper archaeological context. We don't know exactly where they were found, what they were found with, or what culture produced them. This is the critical missing piece. Mainstream archaeologists propose alternative explanations: storage vessels, ritual objects, decorative items, or misidentification. These are valid arguments. Without contextual evidence, how can we be sure? But the design is too precise to be accidental. The copper is carefully rolled into a cylinder. The iron rod is precisely centered. The bitumen seal is intentional. And multiple examples exist with identical design. This looks like engineering, like someone designed it with purpose. If designed intentionally, the battery properties might not be accidental. This is why the Baghdad battery is controversial. We have objects that function as batteries, possible ancient design intent, no evidence of actual use, no contextual documentation, and multiple interpretations equally plausible. We're arguing about what we don't know. If ancient Persians did discover electricity, what else did they achieve? What knowledge was lost when their empires collapsed? The Baghdad battery forces us to ask, what ancient capabilities are we completely unaware of? If the Baghdad batteries were intentionally designed to generate electrical current, the next question is obvious. Why? What would ancient Persians use 0.5 to 1 volt electrical current for? One theory: electroplating. Electroplating is the process of coating one metal with another using electrical current. Example: coat bronze with silver. Ancient artifacts show objects with thin silver coatings on bronze bases. Question: were these electroplated using Baghdad batteries? Or plated using chemical methods? Ancient artisans could coat metals without electricity using mercury amalgam, chemical displacement, or mechanical bonding. These methods were used in ancient Egypt, Mesopotamia, and Persia. They worked, they didn't require electricity. If Baghdad batteries were used for electroplating, we'd expect artifacts showing distinctive electroplating characteristics, electroplated objects concentrated in Parthian or Sasanian sites, workshops with electroplating equipment, and inscriptions mentioning electrical coating. We don't find these. Instead, metallurgical analysis suggests chemical plating, not electrical. This suggests electroplating wasn't the purpose if there was a purpose. Another possibility: medical application. Electrical stimulation can reduce pain, stimulate muscles, potentially treat paralysis or weakness. Ancient Persian physicians might have used Baghdad batteries to treat muscle disorders or provide pain relief. But again, no evidence, no medical texts describe electrical treatment. Perhaps most likely religious or ceremonial use. Ancient rituals involved creating dramatic effects, surprising audiences, demonstrating divine power or knowledge. A Baghdad battery could deliver mild shocks to initiate candidates, create tingling sensation interpreted as divine touch, or power mysterious devices in temples. This would explain why limited evidence remains, why no manufacturing centers are found, and why no texts describe them. Could Baghdad batteries be used for signaling? This is extremely speculative. No evidence of transmission devices. Some artifacts show what might be electroplated silver coating. If Baghdad batteries were used for cosmetic electroplating, this would explain why limited evidence and no texts exist. But metallurgical analysis suggests chemical plating was used, not electrical. One speculation: Baghdad batteries weren't individual sources but accumulators. Multiple cells connected in series to build up charge. Evidence would be multiple jars found together, connecting materials, configuration suggesting series connection. Some examples do show multiple jars found in proximity, but whether they were intentionally connected is unknown. The fundamental issue: we don't have ancient documentation. No Persian texts explaining the Baghdad battery. We're reverse engineering something when the manual has vanished. It's like finding a mysterious machine 2,000 years in the future with no instructions. You can see it works. Understanding what it was meant to do is much harder. The Occam's razor problem. The simplest explanation: storage jars. The copper and iron were used for different purposes, happened to corrode into battery-like shapes, and modern interpretation imposes electrical properties anachronistically. This might be true, but it also might be wrong. The problem: we can't definitively prove either way without more evidence. If the Baghdad batteries were intentionally designed electrical devices, they came from somewhere. A tradition, a discovery, a person or group of people who figured it out. The question: who? The Baghdad batteries are typically dated to the Parthian Empire, which lasted from 247 BC to 224 AD. The Parthians were a powerful empire controlling Persia, known for advanced metallurgy, active trade, and sophisticated military technology. But they were not known for scientific innovation. Parthian culture valued military prowess and practical engineering, making accidental discovery more likely than an intentional research program. Some Baghdad batteries date to the early Sasanian Empire, the successors to the Parthians. The Sasanians were known for advanced astronomy, sophisticated irrigation engineering, and centers of learning. If Baghdad batteries were intentional, the Sasanian context seems more likely, as their culture was more intellectual than Parthian. The copper industry in ancient Persia was vast. Persian metallurgists were known for bronze production and decorative metalwork. If experimenting with electroplating or electrochemistry, they would have access to copper, knowledge of metallurgy, and skilled craftsmen. Furthermore, Baghdad batteries need acidic liquid to function. Persia produced wine, vinegar, and fruit juices, all capable of providing the acidic electrolyte, so the necessary fuel was available. Ancient Persian scholars were active in astronomy, mathematics, and philosophy, but there's no surviving text on electrical experiments. Either the knowledge wasn't recorded, texts were lost, or the discovery was never made. Persia had major centers of learning, but subsequent conquests and decay led to the loss of countless texts. If the batteries were documented, the texts are gone. What Persia did accomplish shows their capability for sophisticated innovation, fitting the pattern of achievement electrochemistry would represent. After the Islamic conquest, pre-Islamic knowledge was often lost. The Baghdad batteries would be lost knowledge from the pre-Islamic period. Persia controlled the Silk Road trade. If the batteries had practical value, knowledge might have spread, but no evidence of battery-like devices appears outside Persia. This suggests either they were not widely useful or not widely known. One theory is that they came from a specialized workshop, led by a single master craftsman with the knowledge kept secret. When the workshop closed or the master died without teaching a successor, the knowledge died with the generation. This would explain the limited number of examples, the lack of workshop evidence, and the absence of surviving instructions. The unanswered questions remain. Who designed the first Baghdad Battery? Did they understand they were creating electricity? And did knowledge transfer to successors? We don't have answers, just artifacts. And speculation. Here's the uncomfortable truth. Most mainstream archaeologists don't believe the Baghdad batteries were intentional electrical devices, and they have good reasons. The Baghdad batteries lack proper archaeological context. They weren't professionally excavated with careful documentation or analysis. Without context, interpretation is purely speculative. Crucially, absolutely zero ancient texts describe making electrical devices using electrical current or any concept resembling electrochemistry. If Baghdad batteries were known and used, someone would have written about it. The absence of textual evidence is compelling. Furthermore, metallurgical analysis of supposed electroplated objects shows that the coating characteristics match chemical plating, not electrical plating. Electrical plating leaves distinctive markers. Ancient artifacts show chemical plating markers. This suggests that even if Baghdad batteries generate electricity, they probably weren't used for plating. There is also a manufacturing gap. If Baghdad batteries were mass-produced, we'd find more examples, workshops, and trace evidence. We don't. This suggests extremely limited production, or that they were not an established technology. For every theorized use, electroplating, medical treatment, ritual shocking, ancient techniques accomplish the same goal without electricity. Ancient people didn't need electricity. They had working alternatives, which reduces the motivation for developing it. Skeptics propose the accidental battery counter-argument, that these are simply storage vessels. The copper and iron were structural components, and their battery-like properties are coincidental, a modern interpretation imposed on ancient objects. We see a battery because we know batteries. Ancients may have simply seen a storage jar. Modern researchers construct replicas and fill them with vinegar to measure voltage. But did ancients ever fill these with vinegar? Maybe the jars held water or oil, which generates no current. We've reconstructed batteries by choosing the one scenario that makes them work. This is confirmation bias. Finally, the extraordinary claim standard. The claim that ancient Persians discovered electricity contradicts the known history of science and lacks any supporting records or practical applications visible in the archaeological record. For skeptics, the evidence, a few jars that might work as batteries, doesn't match the extraordinary claim, an ancient electrical discovery. The burden of proof. Skeptics argue the burden is on Baghdad battery believers to prove they were intentional. Showing a jar can generate electricity isn't proof. Showing someone designed it intentionally to generate electricity is required. The proof doesn't exist, just possibility. Most archaeologists conclude these are interesting artifacts. They might function as batteries, but we have no evidence they were designed as batteries, produced intentionally as batteries, or used as batteries. The battery interpretation is a modern hypothesis imposed on objects whose actual purpose remains unknown. This is the safe, evidence-based position. The believer's response counters. The precision of design, the multiple examples, the absence of alternative explanations, all suggest intentional battery design. The lack of surviving texts is explained by lost libraries and knowledge decay. Absence of evidence isn't evidence of absence. Both arguments have merit. This is why the Baghdad battery remains controversial. Evidence for objects function as batteries. Design appears intentional. Evidence against: no texts, no usage evidence, no manufacturing trace, no archaeological context. We're stuck, unable to definitively prove either way. The Baghdad battery represents a gap in evidence and how interpretation rushes in to fill it. Here's the unsettling possibility. What if ancient Persians did discover electricity? Not through systematic research, but through experimentation, accident, and curiosity. What if they figured out something about electrochemistry and then forgot it? This is the knowledge fragility pattern. We've seen this before with Damascus steel, where the exact medieval technique is lost, and Greek fire, whose formula died with the Byzantine Empire. In each case, knowledge existed, was used successfully, and was then lost, only to be rediscovered or remain lost. Knowledge dies when it is not written down. Texts are destroyed by fire or conquest, institutions collapse, or the oral tradition breaks. All of these factors likely contributed to the loss of the Baghdad Battery knowledge if it existed. Imagine the cascade effect. Generation 1, a craftsman discovers electrical properties. Generation 2, the technique is refined and passed to apprentices. Generation 3, political instability causes decline, and the craftsman dies without a successor. Generation 4, the knowledge is dead. This could happen within 100 to 200 years. The Islamic conquest of Persia severely disrupted pre-Islamic institutions and knowledge transmission. If the knowledge existed before the conquest, the workshops might have closed and the texts vanished. Furthermore, if Baghdad batteries offered only a marginal improvement over simpler, practical alternative technologies, such as chemical plating or herbal medicine, the knowledge would become optional. And if the knowledge was kept secret, a guild secret or religious secret, it would be highly vulnerable to loss. A secret kept by 10 people dies completely if those 10 die without teaching others. The timeline of rediscovery is staggering. 1,200 years of forgotten knowledge. If this happened with the Baghdad batteries, it raises an unsettling implication. What else was lost? Hundreds of technologies could have been discovered, used, and lost forever. The Baghdad Battery may be less about ancient electricity and more about the historical fragility of human knowledge itself. Each time, the pattern holds. Knowledge is fragile. Institutions collapse. Texts disappear. The oral tradition breaks. And future people either rediscover or don't. Consider the Great Library question. Alexandria held hundreds of thousands of texts. How much of what we think was unknown to the ancients was actually known, documented, then forgotten due to destruction? We know some things were lost, like Damascus steel, Greek fire, and the Baghdad batteries. But how many lost technologies do we not even know about? Knowledge so completely forgotten that we don't even recognize its traces, looking at them in museums without understanding what they are. This leads to the regression theory. What if human knowledge isn't constantly advancing, but cycling? Rise, peak, collapse, dark age, rediscovery, and rise again. The Baghdad batteries suggest this pattern. Ancients achieved it, lost it, moderns rediscovered it in a different form and achieved greater sophistication. The uncomfortable question remains: if knowledge can be lost this quickly, what knowledge are we losing right now? Specialized techniques dying with the last practitioners. Languages becoming unreadable. Manufacturing methods abandoned. We assume we are accumulating knowledge, but we might also be hemorrhaging it. The Baghdad batteries were almost thrown away. They were found, not recognized, and almost discarded, only to be accidentally discovered to work as batteries. In the early 1900s, they were cataloged simply as pottery vessels or metal fragments. Nothing special. The true discovery was an accident. At some point, an experimenter filled one with vinegar, touched the two terminals together, and felt a shock. Suddenly, an obscure artifact became interesting. But this required a long chain of unlikely events. Someone curious enough to experiment, access to the artifact, the idea to use acidic liquid, and the willingness to touch the terminals. Any one failure could have left the artifact a mystery. Early findings about the batteries were met with intense skepticism. While the debate continued, other examples might have been melted down, thrown away, or lost to decay. How many artifacts sit in museum storage never studied? Estimates suggest 95% of artifacts are in storage. For every Baghdad battery found, how many identical objects were misidentified as junk? The identification problem is compounded by the recognition failure. If we found the user manual for Baghdad batteries, would we recognize it? Or would we misinterpret it as a ritual or decorative description? We might be finding crucial evidence and not recognizing it. The technology gap is also a factor. Other artifacts might require technology we haven't invented yet. What discoveries are we unable to make until our technology improves? Current artifacts are stored in museums and sites vulnerable to fire, disaster, and decay. This is the archive risk. Preservation depends on funding and institutional continuity, all fragile. Future generations might lose artifacts we found if storage fails. This creates a circular problem. We found Baghdad batteries by accident. We recognized their significance by experimenting. We studied them using modern technology. And we're still debating what they were. Meanwhile, other similar artifacts might be misidentified. The entire process depends on luck, accident, and chance. The Baghdad Battery story is a constant reminder. How many discoveries did we miss? How many are we still missing? The Baghdad Battery forces a final question. And the honest answer is, we don't know, and might never know. The evidence for: objects generate electrical current when filled with acidic liquid. Design appears intentional. Rolled copper, centered iron, bitumen seal. Multiple examples exist with identical design, suggesting established technology. Possible applications are theoretically feasible, and the precision of construction exceeds accidental correlation. The evidence against: no ancient texts describe electrical devices or electrical applications. No workshop evidence suggests battery manufacturing. No usage evidence in the archaeological record. No receiving or application equipment found alongside the batteries. Easier explanations exist, such as storage vessels or ritual objects. And critically, there is an absence of evidence for intentional design. The debate ultimately hinges on how we interpret ambiguous evidence. If you assume intentionality, the design looks deliberate. If you assume accident, the battery properties seem coincidental. Both interpretations are logically possible. The evidence alone can't settle the question. What's the likelihood Baghdad batteries were intentional electrical devices? The conservative estimate is 5 to 10%. The moderate estimate is 20 to 30%. The optimistic estimate is 50% or more. Which estimate is correct depends on how much weight you give circumstantial evidence versus direct evidence. The gap between could have been and was is significant. The Baghdad battery theory is nearly unfalsifiable, as any lack of evidence is explained away as lost to time. This is methodologically problematic, as good science prefers theories that could be proven wrong. Weighing all evidence, the most likely scenario is that the Baghdad batteries were storage vessels or ritual objects, and their battery properties are coincidental. But most likely isn't certain. The truth might be the unlikely scenario. The Baghdad battery teaches intellectual humility. We examine objects thousands of years old and construct theories, but we might be completely wrong. The artifact might have had a purpose we haven't even imagined. Our interpretations are educated guesses, not facts. It is a reminder that what we claim to know about the past is often speculation clothed in the language of certainty. The honest position is that the Baghdad batteries are interesting artifacts with unknown purpose. They function as electrical cells, but whether this was intentional, accidental, or coincidental cannot be determined from available evidence. It remains forever between interpretations. The Baghdad battery is a single corroded object, but it represents something vast. Everything we don't know. It is a known unknown. But how many unknown unknowns are there? Ancient technologies we've destroyed or knowledge we don't even recognize as lost. The pattern holds across history, and some knowledge, like Damascus steel, is irreversibly lost. The Baghdad battery represents this category. Knowledge survives when institutions survive. We assume digital storage is safe, but digital knowledge is more fragile than we think. In 200 years, archaeologists will find our artifacts. They'll discover smartphones as incomprehensible black rectangles and hard drives as corroded platters. Our technology will be as mysterious to them as Baghdad batteries are to us. They will debate. They'll probably get it mostly wrong, just like we're doing with Baghdad batteries. This is the eternal human condition. We study the past through fragmentary evidence and incomplete information. We construct narratives that feel true. We assume our interpretations are facts, and future people will do the same about us. The Baghdad Battery is teaching us what we're too proud to learn. We don't understand the past. And they won't understand us either. All we have is speculation. Educated speculation, but speculation nonetheless. We're drowning in data while starving for knowledge. The Baghdad Battery reminds us that sophisticated technology can become invisible, and interpretation is always tentative. It is a reminder of our ignorance and a warning about our hubris.